Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses for being here. Let me say that I, too, am pleased that we're finally holding a hearing after years on this vitally important topic, particularly as these anti-Jewish, anti-Israel protests now erupt again on our college campuses, most of which, all of which, are getting massive amounts of federal funding. Mr. Rockland, is that how I say your name, by the way? Is it Rockland?
Rackland, just imagine
Rackland.
R-A-C-K rather than
Rackland. Okay, I got it. All right, I'll see if I can adhere to that.
The senator opens his remarks by thanking the chair and the witnesses, but he immediately shifts into a tone of urgency and frustration. He emphasizes that although the topic has been relevant for years, it is only now receiving the attention it deserves, particularly as anti-Jewish and anti-Israel demonstrations erupt once again across university campuses that receive substantial federal funding. He notes that these campuses, supported by taxpayer dollars, are expected to uphold safety, neutrality, and academic integrity, yet increasingly they are becoming sites of hostility. Turning to the witness, he clarifies the pronunciation of his name. A brief, polite moment amidst a tense exchange, then moves straight into his central question, whether foreign students studying in the United States on visas should face consequences, including visa revocation, if they commit unlawful acts of violence against Jewish students. He expresses disbelief that there is hesitation on this question, stressing that student visas are privileges contingent on responsible behavior. According to him, the message should be simple and clear. Those who come to study peacefully are welcome. Those who commit targeted violence should lose the privilege of remaining. He frames the issue not only as a matter of immigration policy, but as a question of moral clarity and campus safety.
Let me just ask you, I just want to make sure that I heard you in response. I think it was to Senator Welch. Did you say that you're not in favor of canceling visas for foreign students who commit unlawful acts against Jewish students?
I said at this time, Nexus does not have a position on that, the organization I work for. And then I went on to describe how in the national strategy, it doesn't talk about that, doesn't recommend that, and that was done in consultation with 1,000 leaders across the board and was supported by the ADL, AJC, JFNA, J Street, all of us.
So you don't.
In response, the witness tries to offer a nuanced explanation, distinguishing between criminal law and immigration enforcement. He explains that when a student, foreign or domestic, engages in violent or unlawful acts, that conduct falls within the jurisdiction of the Justice Department and must be handled as a criminal matter. Deportation, however, is regulated by immigration statutes and procedures, which only come into play after specific investigative or judicial thresholds are met. He notes that current legislation does not explicitly tie visa revocation to campus-related misconduct unless it rises to the level of a defined criminal offense. The witness suggests that any new policy linking visa status to campus behavior would require legislative action by Congress to ensure clarity and fairness. He also mentions that if such a law were to be drafted, it should not single out one group, but should instead protect all students from discrimination or targeted violence, regardless of the identity of the victims. He insists that he is not defending wrongdoing. He is simply stating the boundaries of current legal authority. His tone suggests an attempt to remain cautious and align with established procedure rather than making sweeping pronouncements.
I think that's not a good idea. I mean, why would we permit a foreign student who's here on a student visa who commits an act of violence, an unlawful act against a Jewish student? Why wouldn't we say, sorry, but if you're going to commit acts of violence against Jewish students, Jewish Americans or foreign Jewish students, whomever, we're going to revoke your visa. I mean, you're going home.
So I think on that issue itself, I'm trying to think now. It's not.
The senator immediately counters the witness's framing, asserting that he believes the Secretary of State already possesses the authority to revoke visas if foreign students violate the terms of their stay. He argues that visas are conditional, not automatic, and that the U.S. government has broad discretion to withdraw them when students engage in violent, threatening, or dangerous behavior. He emphasizes that assaulting Jewish students or any students on campus is not just a minor infraction, but a serious breach of the safety and trust that campus communities depend on. He insists that administrative agencies do not need to wait for new legislation to enforce consequences. The senator maintains that taking swift action would send a powerful deterrent message to anyone considering violent conduct, making it clear that the United States will not tolerate harassment, intimidation, or physical attacks against Jewish students. He further suggests that strong enforcement would reassure Jewish families that their children can study in safety and without fear of targeted aggression. His tone becomes increasingly assertive as he questions why anyone would hesitate to implement what he sees as an obvious and necessary measure.
When you're talking about acts of violence and you're talking about actually breaking U.S. law towards students, that is criminal. That should be done through the Justice Department. When we're talking about deportation, that's immigration. So if there is a criminal investigation that leads to deportation, I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Well, I'm talking about student visas. They're here on visas. They're here on particular.
Doing that.
Well, sure, but why don't we write into the process a condition of the visa that if you assault a Jewish student on campus, you're out of here.
After establishing his position on visas, the senator transitions to a broader critique of DEI programs across American universities. He argues that many DEI initiatives, originally designed to promote inclusion and equity, have evolved into ideological frameworks that categorize students into hierarchies of oppressors and victims. According to him, Jewish students often find themselves placed into the oppressor category based solely on assumptions regarding Israel or perceived socio-political identity. The senator provides examples that he describes as deeply concerning. A DEI chair at MIT releasing statements accusing Israel of genocide and apartheid. The University of Washington's DEI office distributing emails that characterize Israel as an oppressive settler colonial power, and reports of a DEI program coordinator at Rutgers using hostile language toward Jewish students and accusing them of colonialism. The senator stresses that these statements do not originate from fringe activists, but from official university positions with institutional authority. He asserts that such rhetoric has real consequences, including social exclusion, intimidation, and even physical danger for Jewish students. He argues that the misuse of DEI frameworks has helped normalize the harassment of Jewish students rather than protecting them.
You're gone.
If it was written in the statute and if it was broad enough to be not just be for Jews, but for all people that have experienced discrimination, regardless of who they are, I think that we should look at that. But I think until that is in law, what I'm basing this on is what the current statute says and what currently is being done.
Well, listen, I guess I don't understand the hesitation here at all. To me, this is an easy call, and I've urged the current Secretary of State, Secretary Rubio, to do this. I think he's got the authority to do it. My position is it would send an incredibly clear message. If you come to this country on a student visa,
the senator expands further on this argument, explaining how some DEI frameworks rely heavily on intersectional ideology that categorizes individuals by perceived privilege or oppression based on group identity, rather than individual behavior. In this system, he argues Jewish students are often misclassified because of misconceptions about their history, culture, or political connections. He says that this leads DEI officers and campus staff to portray Jewish students as representatives of an oppressive state or system, regardless of the student's personal views. According to him, such thinking reduces complex historical, cultural, and geopolitical realities into oversimplified narratives that demonize Jewish individuals. He warns that labeling Jewish students as colonizers or imperialists misleads other students, inflames tensions, and creates environments where hostility toward them is rationalized. He notes that this ideological framing undermines the real purpose of DEI, which should be about fostering genuine inclusion and reducing hostility, not amplifying it. He argues that instead of promoting understanding, the rhetoric circulated within some DEI offices has contributed to division and misunderstanding on campuses nationwide.
You are here as a guest of the United States for particular purposes. If you assault a Jewish student on campus, you ought to be out of here. And we ought to make it clear to people we are not going to tolerate it. We're not going to tolerate it for any reason. Can I just ask you why I have you here, Mr. Recklin?
Yeah,
I've heard you talk about DEI. I just want to be clear on this. You would agree, wouldn't you, that much of this DEI rhetoric has been weaponized against Jewish students?
The witness acknowledges many of the senator's concerns while trying to provide additional context. He affirms that it is wrong to blame Jewish students for the actions of any government, including Israel's. He stresses that students should never be targeted based on their ethnicity, religion, or perceived political alignment. He also says that although some international human rights organizations use terms like apartheid or colonialism, these terms remain contested and are not universally accepted. Speaking from personal experience, he notes that he has visited Israel and the West Bank many times and has family living in Israel. He expresses appreciation for the cultural richness and personal importance of the region. At the same time, he acknowledges that the situation in the West Bank involves inequality, restricted mobility, and ongoing disputes that raise legitimate questions about governance and human rights.
The DEI dialogue has been weaponized against them. They're called colonizers. They're called imperialists. They're called oppressors. It's the classic intersectionality DEI language. I'll give you some tangible examples. The DEI chair at MIT publicly issued statements calling Israel a genocidal apartheid state. You have the University of Washington's DEI office that sent out an email describing Israel as, once again, an unlawful and oppressive settler colonial apartheid state. The DEI program coordinator at Rutgers.
As the witness speaks, the senator interrupts, politely but firmly, because his allotted time is nearly up and he wants to refocus the discussion. He insists that the central issue is not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict itself, but rather the behavior of DI officials within American universities who use their institutional roles to promote biased narratives. He argues that when official DI departments distribute emails or make public statements accusing Israel of genocide or apartheid, they are not engaging in neutral analysis, but are endorsing one-sided political interpretations. These statements carry the weight of the institution behind them and therefore influence campus climate. The senator argues that such messaging creates an atmosphere where Jewish students feel misrepresented, stigmatized, and threatened. He reiterates that universities have a duty to maintain environments where all students feel safe and respected. He expresses concern that DI departments are failing to meet that obligation and may even be contributing to the escalation of hostility on campus.
Said to Jewish students, F you colonizer, F you Zionists. I mean, my point is, isn't it time to speak some truth to power here to these people and to say that Israel is not a colonizer state. It is not an apartheid state. Jewish students are not colonizers, and this kind of rhetoric shouldn't be weaponized against them. You'd agree with that, surely.
I would say that it's wrong to blame Jewish students for the actions of the state of Israel in any way, shape, or form.
And it's wrong to call the state of Israel a colonial apartheid state.
I would say that Israel right now.
The senator presses the witness to take a firm position, asking whether he agrees that DI officials should not label Jewish students or Israeli students as colonizers, nor publicly describe Israel as an apartheid state in university communications. He says this type of language is not appropriate for individuals in administrative roles who are expected to promote inclusion and resolve conflicts rather than create them. He emphasizes that condemnation should be absolute, full stop, without qualifiers, without exceptions, and that institutions must uphold neutrality and protect students from discriminatory rhetoric. He argues that partial condemnation or overly diplomatic phrasing is insufficient because it leaves room for the rhetoric to reappear. He insists that leaders must be clear and decisive when addressing language that targets groups of students based on identity. He concludes by stating that universities must ensure that DI offices do not become platforms for advancing political agendas at the expense of students' safety and well-being.
A number of different human rights organizations talk about them in that sense. Personally, I don't see them I don't see Israel that way. I've been there many a times. I have family that live there. I've been to the West Bank. I've enjoyed it. However, there are considerable issues regarding the occupation that need to be addressed, and inadequacies between how Palestinians live in the West Bank versus how Palestinian Israelis live in.
My time, I'm only interrupting you because my time has almost
please.
expired, and the chairwoman is being extremely strict on the time. So, but I just want to make this point because I think we're seeing it over and over and over where you have.
The witness responds by proposing that rather than eliminating DI programs outright, universities should reform them by incorporating thorough training on anti-Semitism. He suggests bringing in specialists or partnering with outside organizations to ensure that DI officers receive a comprehensive understanding of Jewish identity, history, religious diversity, and the unique challenges Jewish students face. He argues that many DI practitioners lack awareness in this area and inadvertently perpetuate stereotypes because their training frameworks focus heavily on other identity groups. By expanding their education, universities could ensure that DI departments treat Jewish students with the same respect and sensitivity that they are expected to demonstrate toward all students. He argues that the solution is not to dismantle DEI, but to broaden and strengthen it, so that it becomes genuinely inclusive, accurate, and sensitive to all communities on campus.
Actual campus apparatus, DEI apparatus on these campuses. These are departments, these are officials, these are professors who are weaponizing that against Jewish students. My question is, shouldn't we condemn that? No holds barred. Say that is wrong for DEI officials to be saying Israeli students are colonizers, Jewish American students are colonizers, Israel's an apartheid state. That is wrong, full stop. No conditions. Would you agree with that?
I would say that a lot of DEI programs need to actually bring into its anti-Semitism training, either going to other organizations, because so much of what is happening within the DEI
or just be eliminated. Why don't we just eliminate the DEI programs and eliminate the kind of reverse discrimination against Jews that they are
Hawley,
promoting?
I appreciate your passion, and we understand. Thank you very much for your participation.
In his final moments, the senator returns to his central critique. If DI programs cannot uphold their mission and instead contribute to what he sees as ideological bias and discrimination, then perhaps they should be reconsidered or eliminated entirely. He argues that DI initiatives are funded by substantial university resources and therefore must be held to high standards of fairness and neutrality. If they repeatedly fail to meet those standards, he questions whether they are serving any constructive purpose. He emphasizes that universities must create environments where all students, including Jewish, Muslim, Israeli, Palestinian, and others, feel safe, respected, and treated equally. He warns that any institutional office that promotes biased rhetoric undermines the educational mission of the university. As his time expires, the chair acknowledges his passion and thanks the witness for participating, bringing the exchange to a close while recognizing the intensity and seriousness of the discussion.